Hi, welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and in this video I want to talk about my Around the World Reading Challenge. You may have heard me mention it in previous videos, but I realized that I've never actually talked about what the challenge is and what I'm hoping to accomplish. So that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to let you know what my Around the World Reading Challenge actually is and give you an update of where I am with it. So let's get started. In the fall last year, about October or so, it was right around when I actually started watching booktube videos, and I saw someone talk about this challenge they had to read books from various countries around the world, and it intrigued me. And she had mentioned, I wish I could remember who this booktuber was, but I can't, I'm sorry. She had mentioned a book she read from the library where she got the idea from, so I got that book out of the library, and that kind of sparked my thinking for this challenge, and I thought it would be really interesting to try and find books that are set in other countries than my own. I live in Canada, and so I thought it would be really interesting to see what I could find. So I did what the woman in this book did, which was start with a list of countries that were at the 2012 Olympic Games. I started with that list of countries, and then I went to my library website and started just looking for books. And by the time I was finished, I had a list of 195 countries, and I was fine with that. I knew I wasn't going to find something from every country. Some are more difficult than others, and I didn't make it so difficult that it had to be an author from that country, written in the language spoken by that country, then translated into English. That was far too complicated. So ideally, if it was from an author from that country, great, but if I could find a book just that was set in that country, then that was acceptable to me as well. So I started this challenge in October 2019, and I have read from 23 countries so far, and I think that that's pretty good. Ultimately, my goal here is to just expand my reading and to kind of have a more diversity in my reading. I think I do fairly well in general, but like all people, I tend to read from mostly just a few countries. And so it's been really interesting so far. So one thing that I did, because I thought it was a fun visual, was I printed off this world map, and I've been coloring in countries as I have been reading them. Now, those eagle-eyed among you might notice that Canada is not colored in. Well, I'm going to talk about Canada at the end of the video, because I decided fairly recently to do a separate sub-challenge for Canada in this challenge. And so I'm going to talk about that later. So for right now, I am just going to whiz through the books that I've read so far and let you know which country they are from. So I have read a book set in Australia. This one I do not have a copy of for you, so I'm going to put a picture in. Last Woman Hanged by Carolyn Overington. This was from 2014, and it's a non-fiction book. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. The subtitle, or the tagline is "One Woman, 2 Husbands, 4 Trials, 1 Bloody Execution." In January of 1889, Louisa Collins, a 41-year-old mother of 10, became the first woman hanged at Darlinghurst Jail, and the last woman hanged in New South Wales. It was a really interesting story. I highly recommend. I have read a book set in Denmark, and this is The Scarred Woman by Jussi Adler-Olsen from 2017. This is the 7th in a series, and it has been translated by William Frost. This is a mystery. This book I only gave about 2.5 stars to, and I think one of the big reasons was because it was the 7th in the series and I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know who the characters were, any of their backstories, and some of that was, I think, kind of important into this book. So because I felt so out of touch with what was going on, I didn't enjoy the book as much as I may have. It's a Department Q novel. The main character is Detective Karl Mork. In Copenhagen, it's set in Copenhagen, and Department Q is the Cold Case Division. Finland, and this is Cruel is the Night by Karo Hamalainen. I'm really sorry, I'm probably not going to say that correctly. This came out in 2013 and I gave this one 3 stars, and it was translated from the Finnish by Owen Witzman. 3 cell phones ring in an opulent London apartment. The calls go unanswered because their recipients are all dead. 4 Finnish friends meet for dinner that night, and it's been 10 years since the host has seen his once best friend Mikko. And so then the story is what happened in that apartment. And then I have read a couple of books set in France. The one that I have a copy of for you, this is an omnibus called The Winemaker Detective by Jean-Pierre Aleax and Noel Balen. This is from 2004, and this omnibus contains Treachery in Bordeaux, Grand Cru Heist, and Nightmare in Burgundy. And these ones were very interesting because they were very much a combination of detective stories and wine appreciation, let's say. I gave this 3 stars as well. I am amateur sleuths who gumshoe around French wine country where money, deceit, jealousy, inheritance, and greed are all the ingredients needed for crime. One of the characters is a master winemaker. And so I found that the stuff about wine was really interesting, and this was translated from the French by Anne Traeger and Sally Payne. I also have read Black Water Lilies, and I'll put a picture up here, by Michel Bussi. This was from 2011. This one I gave 4 stars to. I really liked this one. It was translated by Sean Whiteside. This was a mystery set in Giverny. 3 women, a young painting prodigy, a seductive village schoolteacher, and an old widow who watches over the village from a mill by the stream. All 3 of them share a secret, and the book is set over the course of 13 days. It was really well done. I really enjoyed that one. And then I have also read a book set in Germany. This is The Ice Queen by Nele Neuhaus from 2009. This is the 3rd in the series. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite that I had read in the series. And this was translated from the German by Stephen Murray. And so this one is their police procedurals. The main character is Detective Pia Kirchhoff and Oliver Bodenstein are a pair of detectives who investigate. And in this case, the body of a 92-year-old Jussi Goldberg, a Holocaust survivor and an American citizen, is found shot to death execution style in his house near Frankfurt. So as they investigate, of course, there's a lot of stuff related to World War II that comes up, which was very interesting. I've read quite a lot set in Great Britain, and so I chose for this Around the World Reading Challenge a type of book that is outside of what I normally read. I read a lot of mystery, and I read a lot of historical mystery, and a lot of that is set in Great Britain already. So I chose to read a book that was a little bit different. And so I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This was a great story. I gave it 4 stars. This came out in 2017, and I got the book out of the library again for this video, but I've decided to keep it and do a reread because I really did enjoy this book. Eleanor Oliphant is a great character, and it's a story about this woman who is just kind of barely surviving. She drinks away her weekends, and then she meets a couple of people who change her life, and it's just a really, really good story. I have read a book from Iceland, set in Iceland. This is called Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This one is not translated, and I don't think, yes, the author is actually from Australia, but this is a historical fiction based on true events. And so this is based on the story of the last woman executed in Iceland. And it was interesting, but I didn't love it. And I gave it 3 stars. I've also read a book or 2 set in India. This is the Satapur Moonstone by Sujata Massay. This is the second in the series. I've read both of them, so I could have used either one for this video. These are historical mysteries, and the author was born in England to parents from India and Germany, and then she's grown up in America. So these are set in India in the early 1920s, and the main character is Perveen Mistry, who is a lawyer, kind of one of the first female lawyers, and this was really good too. I gave this one 4 stars. And then I've read a mystery set in Indonesia, and I don't have a copy of it, so I'm going to put the picture here. A Bali Conspiracy Most Foul by Shamini Flint. This is from 2009, and it's the 4th in this series. No, sorry, it's the 2nd in this series. I gave it 4 stars. The author of this series lives in Singapore, and the detective, it's a detective series, Inspector Singh. And in this case, he is sent to Bali after a bomb goes off, and a body has been found in the wreckage, killed by a bullet before the bomb went off, and so Inspector Singh has to investigate that particular death. It was a really interesting story. I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed the Inspector Singh series by Shamini Flint quite a lot, actually. And then I have also read, I just finished this the other day, Singapore Sapphire by, oh no, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about that when I get to Singapore. Okay, I have read a book set in Italy, and I'm going to put the picture up here, In the Shadow of Vesuvius by Tasha Alexander. This book came out this year in 2020. It's the 14th in the series, and I gave it 4 stars as well. This is the Lady Emily series set in the very late 1800s, possibly early 1900s. And in this case, Lady Emily and her husband and various friends are in Pompeii. And she discovers a body in plain sight among the ruins in Pompeii. And I really enjoyed that. It was really good, and I believe it was the first time the authors ever used dual timelines. And so she has the story going on with Lady Emily, but then she also goes back in time to just before the volcano erupts in Pompeii, and so it was really, really interesting. And then I've read a book set in Japan, written in Japan, that I really enjoyed. It was really interesting. It was called The Tokyo Zodiac Murders. I'll put a picture up, by Soji Shimada. This was written in 1981, but it was years before it was translated into English. I gave it 4 stars, and it was translated by Ross and Shika Mackenzie. The book is dual timelines, Japan 1936. You've got an eccentric artist living with 7 women, and he's been found dead in a locked room. So it's a locked room mystery, which is great. His diaries reveal alchemy, astrology, and a complicated plan to kill all 7 of those women. Shortly afterwards, that plan is carried out, and the women are found dismembered and buried across rural Japan. And then the next timeline is 1979. The Tokyo Zodiac murders, as they came to be called, have been obsessing the nation for decades, but not one of them has been solved. And so you have a pair of people investigating, a mystery-obsessed illustrator and a talented astrologer, set off around the country to see if they can finally solve the Tokyo Zodiac murders. It was really, really good. And then I've read a book set in Kenya. This is Love and Death Among the Cheetahs by Rhys Bowen. This is from the Royal Spyness series, which is a historical mystery series, which I really love. This is the latest out from 2019. This is the 13th in the series. I gave it 3 stars. It was great, but it wasn't the best that I've read in the series. But I still really enjoyed it. And Lady Georgiana and her new husband Darcy O'Mara are on their honeymoon in Kenya. I have read a book set in Malaysia. This is another one of the Inspector Singh series by Shamini Flint, called A Most Peculiar Malaysian Mystery. No, A Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder. I'll put the picture here. This is the first one in the series. I've given it 4 stars. Inspector Singh has been sent from his home in Singapore to Kuala Lumpur to solve a murder. Chelsea Liu, a famous Singaporean model, is on death row for the murder of her ex-husband. So like I said already, I really enjoy that series. And then I've read a book set in the Netherlands. This was called Murder in Amsterdam, and it was, I think, technically what you would call an omnibus, because there were 2 stories in this book. The author is A.C. Bantgier. I should have looked up how to say his name. I apologize. I'll put a picture of it here. This was originally written in 1993, and I gave it 3 stars. I could not find who the translators were, but it was translated from the Dutch. This has 2 stories, Dikok and the Sunday Strangler. This is a mystery. It opens with the strangling death of Fat Sonia, an Amsterdam prostitute of whom Inspector Dikok is fond. And Dikok and the corpse on Christmas Eve proves that he is not above breaking the law himself to serve the interest of justice, as he engages a burglar to commit a break-in and then tampers with evidence to entrap the murderer of a young woman. And then I have also read a book from Norway, 1222 by Anne Holt. This was translated by Marlene Delargy. And I gave this one 3 stars. This was supposed to be an isolated, this was an isolated closed circle mystery. And I wanted to like it more than I did. I gave it 3 stars. It's the story of a small group of people who find themselves stuck in a hotel during an apocalyptic snowstorm. I read a book from Oman, and this one, you may think it won't count, but let me explain myself. I'm going to put the picture here. The Food of Oman by Felicia Campbell from 2015. I gave this one 4 stars. And the reason why I'm making it count is because it has recipes. Yes, it's a cookbook. But it also has a good amount of stories of the people behind the food and the country itself. And that's why I felt like I could count it. It was really interesting. I learned a lot of interesting things about this little country. And then I read a book set in Romania called The Girl They Left Behind by Roxanne Veletsos. This was from 2018 and I gave it 5 stars. I really liked this story. This is set just after World War II. It opens during World War II because a little Jewish girl is found on the steps of an apartment building in Bucharest. And Romania is recently in league with the Nazis and the Jewish population is in grave danger. So this little girl ends up being adopted by a wealthy couple. And then the majority of the book takes place once she has grown up, Natalia. And it's about living behind the Iron Curtain. So when Romania is now in a communist country. And it was really great, as you can tell if I gave it 5 stars. And one thing that I found interesting was the author was born in Bucharest and moved to California with her family as a young teen. And the story is based on some certain events in her mother's life. It's not direct at all, but certain events. And so, yeah, it was just really good. And then I have read a couple books set in Russia. Madness Treads Lightly by Polina Dashkova. This was written in 1998 and I gave it 3 stars. It is a mystery, a serial killer mystery, and it was pretty good. But there was just a couple of things that kind of knocked it from a 4-star to a 3-star for me. And it was translated by Marion Schwartz. Only 3 people can connect a present-day murderer to a serial killer who 14 years ago terrorized a small Siberian town, and one of them is already dead. And then I have also read The Dead Mountaineers Inn, and I'm going to put the picture here, by Boris and Arkady Strugatsky. This was first written in 1970, but it was not published, in English, or translated into English until 2015. I gave this one 4 stars. It was so good. It was really interesting, really unusual. It was translated by Josh Billings. Inspector Peter Glebsky arrives at a remote ski chalet on vacation. An avalanche blocks the mountain pass and they're stuck. So this is an isolated closed circle mystery, which I love. In this late novel from the legendary Russian sci-fi duo, here in its first ever English translation, the Strugatskys gleefully upend the plot of many a Hercule Poirot mystery, and the result is much funnier and much stranger than anything Agatha Christie ever wrote. So I was intrigued by the fact that a pair of science fiction writers chose to write a mystery, and they chose to write a closed circle mystery that had a lot of elements of Agatha Christie, I'll confess. It was really fun. And then now we'll get to Singapore. So another in the Inspector Singh series by Shamini Flint. This is the Singapore School of Villainy. I'll put a picture here. This one is the 3rd in the series, and I also gave it 4 stars. This one came out in 2010. In this one, Inspector Singh is called out to the murder of a senior partner at an international law firm who has been clubbed to death at his desk. So in this case, Inspector Singh actually gets to investigate a murder in his own country, in his own city. And so, as you can tell, I've read all the books that I have read so far in that series, I've given 4 stars to. I really, really like them. And then I also just finished, as I said earlier, Singapore Sapphire by A.M. Stewart. This is a historical mystery from 1910 that I really enjoyed as well. Harriet Gordon is in Singapore. She's staying with her brother who runs a school there for boys, and she gets some part-time work as a typist, and she goes to the home of someone that she's working for only to find him dead. And I really enjoyed this as well. I gave it 4 stars. All right, 4 countries left. I've read a book set in South Africa. This is Hum If You Don't Know the Words by Bianca Murray. This came out in 2017, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. It's set in the 70s during apartheid in Johannesburg, and it was really interesting. And I have read a book set in Sweden. This is The Department of Sensitive Crimes by Alexander McCall Smith. This is the first in the series, and it came out in 2019. And I giggled when I saw it was described as Scandinavian Blanc as opposed to Scandinavian Noir. It was great. Also, hilariously, there's a description here that is totally using the formula from Law and Order. If you've ever seen the television show Law and Order, this will be familiar to you. In the Swedish criminal justice system, certain cases are considered especially strange and difficult. In Malmö, the dedicated detectives who investigate these crimes are members of an elite squad known as the Sensitive Crimes Division. These are their stories. And I have read a book set in Switzerland. This is Season of Snows and Sins by Patricia Moyes. I really enjoyed Patricia Moyes, and I love the title of this book and the cover of this book. This was written in 1983. I gave it 4 stars, and it's the 10th in the series. The inspector is Henry Tibbett, and in this book, he and his wife are on holiday in Switzerland, and of course, death occurs, and Henry Tibbett finds himself investigating. Then I have also read a book in the United States. Now, I have read quite a number of books in the United States, and so I've just picked one that I read, kind of in the time period from between October and now. And so this is The Question of the Missing Head. I'm going to put a picture here by E.J. Cooperman. This is from 2014. It's the first in a series, and I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed that, and I've continued on with the series as well. The main character is Samuel Honing, and he answers questions for a living. He's a man with Asperger's syndrome, or he's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. His unique personality helps him ferret out almost any answer there is, but his latest question is rather an odd one. Who stole a preserved head from the Garden State Cryonics Institute? So yeah, it was really interesting. So those are the 23 countries and 23 books that I've read so far for this Around the World challenge. Now, I said earlier that I was going to do something slightly different for Canada. Because that is my country, I thought rather than just counting one book and saying that I've read from Canada, I wanted to read a book from each province and territory. So I've printed out a map here. And as you can see, one of the provinces is already colored in, and that's Quebec. And that's because I've been reading from Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache series. This one I have here is called Glass Houses, and her mystery series are set in Quebec. And so what I want to do for Canada is to read a book from every province or territory. So what I have left is the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, and that's the far north here in Canada. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. So as I read books from those provinces or territories, I will mark my map and I will keep you updated with how I'm doing with that. So, have you read any of these books? Are you kind of in any sort of a around the world reading challenge? You may not call it that, but I'd love to chat about it in the comment section below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye!